You reek of grease and failure, soldier. Stay out of my way. Get me out of this hell alive, and I swear I will marry you!
I will. I promise.
In the hierarchy of war, there are those who give orders from pristine offices, and those who wash the blood off the wheels. Commander Vance was the elite of the elite, untouchable, brilliant, and colder than ice. To her, Cade was nothing more than a grease-stained shadow in the motor pool, a grunt fit only for changing tires. But when the convoy burns and the radio goes silent, rank means nothing. In the face of death, the only thing that matters is who can pull the trigger. Sometimes, the hero you need is the man you refuse to look in the eye. The military hangar smelled heavily of jet fuel and stale coffee. Cade lay silently under the chassis of the massive armored SUV. His wrench turned with a rhythmic metallic click against the bolts. Thick black grease covered his arms all the way to his elbows. He enjoyed the simple, honest silence of the machine. It was far better than the dangerous politics outside the garage. He didn't even hear the heavy blast door slide open. The sharp click of tactical boots on concrete broke his concentration. The hangar floor fell silent instantly. Junior mechanics dropped their tools and stood at stiff attention. Commander Vance strode in like she owned the very air they breathed. Her Navy uniform was terrifyingly spotless and pressed to perfection. Her icy blue eyes scanned the room, hunting for imperfections. She stopped right beside Cade's worn-out boots. Cade slid out from under the truck on his creeper. He stood up slowly and wiped his hands on a dirty rag. He kept his eyes low, respectful of her rank and status. Vance didn't look at his face. She looked at the front fender of the luxury SUV. She ran a white-gloved finger along the reinforced steel. She pulled her hand back and inspected the fabric. A microscopic smear of oil stained the tip of her white glove. Her expression shifted instantly from cold indifference to sharp disgust. She held up her hand for the entire room to see. It was a silent accusation of gross incompetence. "Is this your idea of combat readiness?" she asked. Her voice was low, but it echoed dangerously off the metal walls. Cade stiffened, but remained perfectly silent.
"I asked you a question, soldier," she snapped, stepping closer. Cade met her gaze for a split second. "It is just a little grease, ma'am," he said quietly. That was the wrong answer. Vance stepped deeply into his personal space. She radiated pure, unfiltered hostility. "Just grease. Excellence is in the details, and you are sloppy." She looked him up and down with sneering contempt. "Look at you," she spat, gesturing at his coveralls. "You are a disgrace to this base. Your uniform is a rag. You smell like a rotting junkyard." Cade tightened his grip on the oily rag until his knuckles turned white. He swallowed his pride and stared at the wall. He could field strip a rifle faster than her entire detail, but today he was just the help. The elite security team standing behind her snickered softly. They were polished, arrogant, and looked at Cade like he was trash. Vance turned to her second-in-command. "Why is this filth allowed to touch my transport?" she demanded. "He is the only specialized mechanic available for this engine type," the officer replied nervously. Vance rolled her eyes. She clearly hated the necessity of his presence. "Fine," she hissed through gritted teeth, "but keep him out of my sight." She turned back to Cade with a final glare. "You drive the support truck. Stay at the very back. If your vehicle breaks down, I will leave you in the desert." She didn't wait for a salute. She climbed into the luxury SUV and slammed the door. The heavy thud felt like a gavel striking a judge's desk. Cade climbed into the battered logistics truck at the rear. It was old, noisy, and lacked the heavy armor of the lead vehicles. He didn't complain. He checked his customized sidearm hidden under the driver's seat. It was a habit from a past life he couldn't discuss. The convoy rolled out into the blinding desert sunlight.
Dust swirled around his cracked windshield as he watched Vance's pristine SUV speed ahead. The route took them deep into the gray zone. The radio chatter was professional and boring. Vance's team joked over the open channel about the grease monkey lagging behind. Cade ignored the insults buzzing in his earpiece. His eyes scanned the high ridgelines constantly. He noticed the lack of birds in the sky. He noticed the eerie silence of the local villages they passed. "Convoy holding at Checkpoint Delta," the lead driver announced. Cade felt a cold chill run down his spine. The terrain was a perfect kill box. Steep canyon walls rose sharply on both sides of the road. "Move," Cade whispered to himself, gripping the steering wheel tight. "Don't stop here." But the lead SUV braked hard. Vance began to shout angry orders over the comms. A streak of white smoke hissed from the cliffside. An RPG slammed directly into the lead escort vehicle. The explosion shook the ground beneath Cade's truck. Fire engulfed the road instantly. Screams replaced the calm chatter on the radio. Vance's SUV was flipped onto its side by the massive blast wave. The ambush had begun, and the useless mechanic was the only one watching the flanks. The ambush turned the canyon into a slaughterhouse. Black smoke blotted out the sun. Bullets rained down from the cliffs like hail. The elite security team didn't stand a chance against the crossfire. Their pristine uniforms were stained red within seconds. The burning wreckage of the lead vehicles blocked the narrow road. Commander Vance hung upside down in her overturned SUV. Her ears rang with a deafening high-pitched whine. Shards of glass covered her face and tactical vest. She tried to reach for her radio, but her arms screamed in pain. "Report, anyone," she choked out. Only static and the sound of gunfire answered her. Panic clawed at her throat for the first time in her career. She was the Ice Queen, but now she was just prey. A shadow fell over her broken window. She flinched, expecting an executioner's bullet. Instead, a gloved hand ripped the crumpled door open with terrifying strength. It was Cade. The mechanic didn't look like a grunt anymore. He didn't look like a frightened support staffer either. He held a pistol with a grip that was too professional. He sliced her jammed seatbelt with a knife in one smooth motion. Vance fell heavily into his arms. He caught her easily, grunting softly from the effort. "Move," Cade ordered, his voice flat and hard. He didn't call her ma'am. He dragged her through the dirt behind the engine block. Bullets kicked up dust inches from their boots. He didn't flinch at the explosions. He moved with a rhythm she couldn't understand. "My team," Vance gasped, trying to look back. "Gone," Cade said ruthlessly. "We are leaving." He shoved her toward his battered logistics truck. It was the only vehicle not burning. The paint was chipped and ugly, but the engine was still running. He threw her into the passenger seat like a sack of potatoes. Cade slammed the driver's door shut and locked it. The cab was hot and smelled of old leather and oil. Outside, 3 enemy trucks with mounted machine guns blocked the road ahead. They were trapped. The insurgents began to fire at the windshield. The bulletproof glass cracked under the heavy impact. Vance curled into a ball, clutching her bleeding arm. She looked at the wall of enemies blocking their path. There was no way out. Her sophisticated strategies and rank meant nothing here. She was going to die in a dirty truck with a man she had insulted. Tears of pure terror streamed down her soot-stained face. She looked at Cade, who was calmly checking the gear stick. He seemed resigned to his fate, or so she thought. Desperation broke her completely. She needed him to try the impossible. She grabbed his oil-stained arm with both hands. Her fingernails dug into his skin. "Do something!" she screamed over the roar of gunfire. She stared into his dark eyes, pleading, "Get me out of this hell alive, and I swear I will marry you." The words poured out before she could stop them. "I will be your wife, I promise. Do something!" she screamed over the roar of gunfire. She stared into his dark eyes, pleading, Get me out of this hell alive, and I swear I will marry you." The words poured out before she could stop them. "I will be your wife, I promise. Just save me." Cade stopped checking the gears. He looked at her trembling hands clutching his dirty sleeve. He looked up at her tear-filled, terrified blue eyes. For a moment, the war outside seemed to pause. A strange, dangerous calm settled over his face. He nodded once, accepting the reckless contract.
"Hold on," Cade said. He shifted the truck into gear with a violent crunch. He didn't reverse away from the danger. He slammed his boot onto the accelerator. The heavy truck roared like a beast waking up. He drove straight toward the wall of enemy guns. The mechanic was gone. The operator had arrived. The heavy truck slammed into the enemy barricade with the force of a freight train. Metals screamed as the insurgent vehicles were shoved aside like toys. Vance squeezed her eyes shut, expecting death. But the truck didn't stop. Cade wrestled the steering wheel with bruised hands, keeping them on the narrow road. The suspension groaned, but the vehicle held together. Bullets pinged off the rear tailgate as they broke through the encirclement. "Take the wheel," Cade ordered calmly. It wasn't a request. It was a command from a superior officer. Vance obeyed instinctively, grabbing the shaking steering wheel with her good hand. Cade kicked his door open while the truck was still moving at 60 miles per hour. He leaned out into the rushing wind, his pistol raised. He didn't fire wildly. He fired 3 times, rapidly and precisely. Boom, boom, boom. The lead pursuing vehicle swerved violently as its driver collapsed. The machine gunner on the second truck slumped over his weapon. It was impossible shooting, the kind only seen in classified training tapes. Cade pulled himself back inside and took the wheel again. His face was a mask of absolute focus. "Threat neutralized," he muttered, checking the side mirror. Vance stared at him, her mouth slightly open. The man sitting next to her was not a motor pool mechanic. No mechanic shot like that. No mechanic commanded the chaos of war with such terrifying stillness. The drive back to the green zone was silent and heavy. The adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a throbbing pain in Vance's arm. She looked at Cade's profile, really looking at him for the first time. The grease on his face didn't look like filth anymore. It looked like war paint. She felt a burning shame rise in her chest, hotter than the desert sun. They rolled up to the base gates, smoke trailing from the truck's engine. The sentries rushed out, weapons raised, until they saw the friendly markings. Cade killed the engine. It shuddered and died with a final clank. Medics swarmed the passenger side to help Vance. She waved them off, her eyes fixed on Cade. The base general marched out from the command tent, flanked by 2 colonels. Vance straightened her posture, preparing to report the loss of her team. She expected a reprimand. But the general didn't stop at her. He walked straight past the commander and stopped in front of the dirty mechanic. The general snapped a crisp, sharp salute. "Glad to have you back, Ghost," the general said with deep relief. "We thought we lost our best asset." Cade returned the salute slowly, his movements sharp and practiced. "Package is secure, General," Cade replied. The entire courtyard went silent. The truth hit Vance like a physical blow. He was a Tier 1 asset, a ghost operative hiding in plain sight. He was the lethal insurance policy assigned to protect her, not serve her. Vance felt her legs go weak. She had insulted a legend. She had treated a warrior like a servant. She watched as he walked away, toward the debriefing tent, leaving her standing in the dust. Hours later, Vance found him sitting on a crate near the airfield. He was cleaned up, wearing fresh fatigues, but his eyes were still tired. She walked over, her arm in a sling. She stood before him, stripped of her arrogance. "I didn't know," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I was cruel. I am so sorry." Cade looked up at her. He didn't smile, but his eyes were softer now. Vance took a deep breath. "About what I said in the truck?"
she stammered, looking at her boots. The promise. I was desperate. I know you don't want. She couldn't finish the sentence. She turned to leave, unable to bear the rejection. I never break a contract, Cade said, his voice stopping her in her tracks. She turned back, stunned. He stood up and stepped into her space, but this time it wasn't intimidating. It was magnetic. You promise to be my wife, he said, reaching out to brush a stray lock of hair from her face. And I intend to collect.